All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, the most predictable thing of all time is happening right now. A sizable portion of the 33 million Americans who had coronavirus are now stuck with huge COVID-related medical bills. Sarah Cliff did some reporting on this over at the New York Times. She writes, one coronavirus survivor manages her medical bills in color-coded folders, green, red, and tan for different types of documents. A man whose father died of the virus last fall uses an Excel spreadsheet to organize the outstanding debts. It has 457 rows, one for each of his father's bills, totaling over $1 million. These are people who are facing the financial version of long-haul COVID. They've found their lives and finances upended by medical bills resulting from a bout with the virus. Now, we don't yet know just how high the numbers are, but we do know that medical bills are already the number one cause of bankruptcy in the U.S., so we can surmise it is not going to be pretty. So what happened here? Remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was some talk of paying COVID medical bills, providing free care to those who were suffering from coronavirus. And perhaps you also recall what happened next. People started to say, well, hey, if people suffering from coronavirus should have their medical bills paid, then maybe people suffering from cancer should have their medical bills paid. And well, if people with cancer should have their medical bills paid, why not heart disease and diabetes and oh, hey, I just had this brilliant idea that maybe every American should be able to see a damn doctor and get treatment when they're sick. Well, that thought quieted the push to pay for COVID medical bills real quick. We did, however, manage to subsidize COBRA, a health insurance company giveaway, and we expanded Obamacare, also a health insurance company giveaway, so can't say that they did nothing. Moving forward, however, they have essentially announced their intention to do nothing. You might recall, long ago on a campaign trail far, far away, Joe Biden promised to pass a public option in order to make Obamacare more robust. Now, Biden's was maybe the most conservative of all the healthcare plans that were offered by the candidates, but he did at least pledge to make the current system somewhat more just and provide some public competition into the private marketplace. Every Democratic debate devoted significant time to this topic, which Democratic primary voters and voters overall named as one of their absolute top issues. Now, it's just vanished from the agenda. I mean, to be honest, I actually expected that exactly this would happen. I noted that as soon as the primary was over, the public option dropped from Joe Biden's talking points. Sure, it was still technically part of the platform, but it wasn't getting much love on the trail. It's been nowhere to be found in Biden's public addresses as president, wasn't inserted in his infrastructure or social welfare spending packages. I mean, if anything meets the new expansive definition of infrastructure, it is certainly the medical system that we all rely on. And now, it's not even being put into Biden's budget request, essentially disappearing the entire topic. According to Jeff Stein and Tyler Page, the White House jettisoned months of planning from agency staff as their initial plan could fuel criticisms that the administration is pushing new spending programs too aggressively. The budget will not include President Biden's campaign pledge to enact a public option to create a government-run health insurance program or his pledge to cut prescription drug costs, those people said. So did you catch that? Even the most obvious of obvious reforms ever, authorizing the government to negotiate better prices with drug companies, even that was taken out of Biden's budget request. So for all those Biden is better than expected and Biden is FDR people, are your aspirations really so low that on one of the most pressing issues according to voters, you will accept near total inaction as a sufficient response? The truth is, Biden doesn't want to touch the healthcare system because he's seen up close how hard it is. He knows how the health insurers will wage complete war, even for modest reforms. He knows that a million niche interests will lobby every single lawmaker in the body so that even so-called progressives demand a carve-out for whatever part of the medical industrial complex employs people in their state. Biden has seen the political backlash from touching the fortified rings of capitalist grift that make up our healthcare system writ large. Besides, he's got some pretend bipartisan meetings with Republicans where he can waste time while not delivering on other agenda items to get to, and we can't take away time from that. And so, millions of Americans are going to hopelessly stare at bills that they can never, ever pay. They'll declare bankruptcy, and they'll deal with the financial Chernobyl that results. They'll put off care that could have saved or prolonged their lives. It is the saddest and most frustrating thing when the moment so clearly calls for the radical, and we're barely even met with the incremental. The fact that the possibility of Medicare for all collapsed down to the reality of temporary COBRA subsidies, that is truly one of the great tragedies of our time. Think about that arc. Back in the Democratic primary, like this big debate over healthcare. And then he gets into office and it's just completely disappeared. The fact that he's not putting it into his budget request at all just tells you, like, that is the official sign that this is over, this is dead. We're not even going to speak of it again.
Well, we always knew it wasn't going to happen. The question was always what kind of treatment it even is going to get. And I think that is the crazy part, which is that when you go and you look at the polling, the number one issue to Democratic primary voters was health care.
Yeah.
And I believe it was number 2 or 3 in the general election for people who voted for Biden. It was like COVID, hating Trump, or sometimes reversed.
Yeah, and COVID happens to be a healthcare issue as well.
Sometimes conflated, and then healthcare. And it's just absent from American political discourse. And you see why. What do we talk about on our show today? Infrastructure, bipartisan as hell. I mean, they could probably not even get a clean infrastructure bill through the Senate today, which is on just being like, we're only going to do roads and bridges. That's it.
Yeah.
Just on that. Because you know why? Because the GOP will not say that you have to raise corporate taxes on it, and you're not allowed to deficit finance, which means working class people have to pay for it through a gas tax. And then the Dems, some of them are with the GOP on not raising the taxes or raising them in such a way that rich people won't actually have to pay all that much, and they don't want to deficit finance. How did this happen? What's happening here?
Not to mention, if you wanted to do something on healthcare, can you think of a more opportune time than we are just coming out of a pandemic? People are still sick. They're dealing with long-haul COVID symptoms, and they have these massive bills that they're going to be struggling with and dealing with for literally the rest of their lives. Like, if you ever had a public case to make, now is the time, and the public is on board with doing something in this realm. They never even tried. And you know, it's really interesting, actually. I was going back and reading what happened at that beginning point when, you remember there was, I think Trump had casually said, like, we're going to pay everybody's bills.
Yes.
And we're all like, whoa, that would be crazy.
He said they were going to do some version of single payer where they were going to pay the hospitals for COVID care. Yeah.
And so that vanished very quickly because in part people started to realize, like, oh, if you do that for this one illness, then people are going to start to realize you could do this for everything. And the health insurance companies stepped in because this was such a threat to them. And they said, we'll cover the COVID bills. We'll cover it. But that allowed them to do it on their own terms.
And then the government could reimburse them.
Right. So what happened is, first of all, a lot of the hospitals that were providing the care coded some of the treatments so that they didn't qualify for that narrow health insurance company exemption. And now they're saying, oh, the pandemic's over. We're not doing that anymore. COVID is going to be treated just like every other disease. So they were able, because they were so freaked out by this idea of the government might pay for these bills, that they signed up like, we'll do it. Well, that kept it on their own terms so they could keep it as narrow as possible and still leave tons of Americans completely screwed.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, coming up, we got Roger Fisk and Marshall Kosloff. They're here for Team Rising when Rising returns.